Welcome back. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a like. Enjoy the video. 75-year-old mother is enslaved by her daughter until one day her brother made a surprise visit. It's still a little dirty. "Mom, you need to keep scrubbing the floor. I want it to be spotless when my guests arrive," said Emily, Monica's youngest daughter, with a tired smile. Monica straightened up and looked at her daughter. "I'm almost done, dear," she said. Just then, Emily's phone rang. It was Mike, her older brother. Despite wanting to ignore him, she answered the call with a frown, not wanting to hear his voice so early in the day. Emily moved away slightly. She didn't want her mother to discover it was Mike on the other end. "What do you want?" she muttered, trying to keep her voice low. From the other side of the house, Monica continued cleaning, unaware of the call. "I want to talk to Mom. Is she awake?" "No, she's not awake yet. I'm just preparing tea to take to her room," Emily responded, controlling her breathing so her agitation wouldn't show. "All right. Don't wake her up. I'll call later," Mike said in a weary tone. "I miss her a lot and want to talk to her." Emily grimaced, knowing her brother would call back that same day, a day when the last thing she wanted was an intrusion from their mother's favorite. She hung up without saying goodbye and returned to the living room. As she walked, she tried to compose herself and not let the conversation affect her plan. She wouldn't let Mike ruin her day or the effort she had put into preparing everything. Meanwhile, in his office, Mike faced a mountain of papers and documents that demanded his attention. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, and his schedule was packed with important appointments. He had meetings with key clients, and every minute of his day seemed meticulously planned. Despite the workload and palpable stress in the air, there was a constant worry he couldn't shake off. He needed to call his mother again. Every time he looked at the clock, he reminded himself of the promise to call later, no matter how busy his day was. As Mike tried to concentrate on the contract in front of him, Lucy, his secretary, gently knocked on the door. "Mr. Mike, your first client is already in the waiting room, ready to be seen," she announced in a calm but firm voice. Mike looked up from the sea of papers, nodded at Lucy, and adjusted his tie before standing up, preparing to meet his client. "All right, send him in," he said serenely, ready to receive the client. Mike quickly tidied his desk, moving the documents into a neat pile in one corner of the table. With precise gestures, he put away the scattered pins in the drawer and straightened the small stack of business cards he always kept at hand. He wanted everything to be impeccable when the client entered, as a sign of respect and professionalism. Finally, he took a deep breath and put on a courteous smile just as the door opened to admit the visitor. The client entered hesitantly and stopped by Mike's desk. He was an older man with deep wrinkles and eyes that bore the weight of many bitter experiences. "Good morning, Mr. Mike. My name is Frank Thompson," said the man with a trembling voice laden with worry. Mike approached and extended his hand, shaking it firmly. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Please have a seat," he said, guiding him to a chair. "Thank you, Mr. Mike. I need your help. I've lost my life savings. Someone took advantage of me because I'm an older man," he said, tears welling up in his eyes. "The little I had for my retirement is gone." Mike listened attentively, his face reflecting empathy and determination. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Thompson. No one deserves to go through something like this. I promise I will do everything in my power to recover your money. I won't let this fraud go unpunished," Mike said with conviction, placing a reassuring hand on the old man's shoulder. Mr. Thompson nodded slightly, his eyes finally finding a glimmer of hope, determined to seek justice for Frank Thompson. Mike began planning the necessary actions to correct this injustice, demonstrating his firmness and commitment to defending his client's rights. The interview lasted more than an hour, during which the lawyer made all the necessary inquiries to fully understand the case presented by Mr. Thompson. He showed genuine empathy and paid close attention to every detail, taking meticulous notes about the situation. Frank described how he had been scammed, providing details about the man who defrauded him and the methods used. When the meeting concluded, Mike asked him to gather all the papers and documents that could help solve the case. With a faint smile, Mike bid farewell to Mr. Thompson, with the promise that he would do everything possible to help him recover what was lost. Mr. Thompson left more at ease and hopeful, feeling he was in good hands, and with renewed confidence that with Mike's help he could achieve justice. The rest of the morning for Mike passed between interviews and complicated cases that required his full attention. Each client that day brought new challenges, forcing him to use all his legal experience and skills. By noon, After a grueling series of meetings, Mike felt the need to disconnect a bit and called his sister, intending to speak with his mom. However, after a couple of failed attempts with no answer, he decided to return to the office, convinced that his sister was busy. He promised himself he would try again later. Meanwhile, at their mother's house, Emily saw the phone ringing incessantly. With a mix of exasperation and mockery, she said to herself, "What a pest. Always trying to be the loving son." She had always noticed Mike's insistence on staying in touch, but at that moment, busy with her own tasks, she decided not to answer. Finally, when the phone stopped ringing, Emily took the opportunity to direct her irritation towards her mother. Despite having been cleaning all morning, she impatiently said, "Mom, you haven't washed the dishes yet. You need to hurry. There are still a lot of clothes to iron." Monica, with her hands still aching from scrubbing the floor, sighed and headed to the kitchen, resigned to fulfill her daughter's demands. She knew any attempt to argue would only result in a confrontation, so in silence, she continued with the household chores while Emily kept doing her nails. Emily's treatment of her mother resembled that of a discontented boss with an employee, more than that of a daughter with her mother. Monica, feeling afflicted, couldn't understand why she was being treated this way. She had always been a dedicated and loving mother, giving her time and effort to raise her children as best as possible. However, at this stage of her life, she was dealing with her daughter's disdain and impatience. The emotional pain weighed as heavily on her as the physical, and she wondered when their relationship had lost the respect and tenderness that once characterized it. Unsatisfied with having given her even more tasks, Emily told her mother about her plans for the evening. "Mom, tonight you can't leave your rooms. My new boyfriend is coming over and I don't want him to see you. You can only come out if I call you. Understood?" Monica, with tears welling in her eyes from her daughter's harsh words, could only respond, "Whatever you say, dear." The hours passed, and night finally fell. Emily got ready, meticulously dressing elegantly, perfuming herself, and applying makeup delicately to welcome her boyfriend home. When Alex arrived, she invited him to make himself at home. Observing the surroundings, he saw the house spotless, gleaming, and perfectly organized, which led him to praise her effort with a sparkle in his eyes. Emily responded, "I love keeping the house in order. I want you to feel comfortable," hoping that night would mark the beginning of something even more special between them. A small noise in the kitchen interrupted the pleasant moment. Alex, somewhat curious, looked over and saw Monica moving with some difficulty, busy with something. "Emily, is that your mother? Please introduce me," said Alex with a friendly smile. Emily, seeing that her mother had not complied with her request to stay locked in her room, felt a wave of anger and deep discomfort. However, she disguised her annoyance in front of her boyfriend. "My mother? No, she's my maid," Emily replied, trying to stay calm and forcing a smile. Monica, who had heard the conversation perfectly, lowered her gaze with immense sadness in her heart. Her thoughts crowded in her mind, recalling past moments and feeling a profound loneliness. Her breathing became heavier, as if every heartbeat hurt. She remained silent and continued preparing her dinner, fighting to hold back tears and trying not to attract more attention. Every movement in the kitchen became mechanical, as her soul sank into a sea of melancholy. Alex, although puzzled by the response, didn't ask further questions, but the uncomfortable atmosphere became palpable. Remembering how this harsh and demeaning situation had started, Monica relived in her mind the moment she had a minor fall at home. Mike's concern for his mother's health was enormous and evident from the start. Desperate to ensure her well-being, he arranged for his sister Emily to move in with her to take care of her. Back then, Emily neither worked nor studied. Mike, without hesitation, offered to cover all household expenses. Never in his worst nightmares had he imagined that his mother would be subjected to such treatment. Every insult, every belittlement, became recurrent and painful memories for Monica. The disdain in Emily's eyes was like daggers piercing her heart. She felt her soul withering under the weight of humiliation and was enveloped by deep sadness, stifling her spirit and consuming her joy of living. At that moment, Monica longed with all her might to hear her son Mike's soothing voice. However, she was aware that Emily had always opposed her having her own mobile phone. This refusal forced her to depend on her daughter's phone, a dependency that made her feel even more vulnerable and trapped. She knew she couldn't approach Emily to ask for it, The mere idea of facing her disdain was paralyzing. Deep down, she sensed that even if she had mustered the courage to ask, Emily would have denied it without hesitation. This desperation, a mix of helplessness and sadness, made her feel like a prisoner in her own home, adding layers of anguish to her already troubled spirit. The memories of happier times were fading, leaving her with a void that seemed to engulf every small ray of hope. However, God saw everything, and there would be consequences. The next morning, Mike left early for the office with 4 very special clients awaiting his advice. Each of them faced very different problems, and Mike, true to his commitment to those seeking justice, was determined to help them. But while preparing his coffee at home, a torrent of memories flooded him. He recalled the mornings of his childhood when his mother used to make him breakfast before school. He remembered how she would cut the toast just the way he liked it. Those moments, filled with love and dedication, made him smile. The warmth of those memories made him promise himself he would call his sister again to check on his mother. His heart was torn between his professional responsibilities and his desire to protect and care for his mother. After working non-stop for a few hours, Mike informed his secretary that he would be going out for lunch but would return soon. He walked to the corner restaurant, a small bistro known for its cozy atmosphere and homemade dishes. Upon arriving, he greeted the waiter and ordered the dish of the day, a beef stew with potatoes that reminded him of home. As he ate quickly, the memories continued to flood his mind. He thought about his mother and how Emily was probably struggling with the same emotions he was. Taking advantage of the moment away from the office hustle, he decided to call his sister. With his heart pounding slightly faster than usual, he dialed Emily's number. The ringing tone echoed in his ear, each sound increasing his anxiety. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Emily answered with a surprised and somewhat distant voice. "Hello, Mike. What do you need? I'm busy." "Hi, sis. How are you? I want to know how Mom is doing. Can you pass her the phone?" She replied, slightly uncomfortable. "No, she can't talk now. She's taking a nap, but she's fine." "Why are you so worried?" she said, trying to avoid him calling again in the next few days. Somewhat puzzled by his sister's response, Mike replied, "I just miss Mom, that's all." Emily, trying to convince him even more, replied with a somewhat annoyed tone, "Don't worry, care of her. I'm taking good care of her." Far from calming him, his sister's response only increased his anxiety. He could care. He felt powerless, unable to be close to his mother and ensure for himself that she was okay. Nevertheless, he decided not to insist further and trusted that Emily was really taking care of everything. With a sigh, he hung up and tried to focus on finishing his lunch. Unbeknownst to him, his sister's intentions were far from genuine. While Emily projected a facade of confidence and assurance, the reality at home was quite different. The truth was that she felt overwhelmed and resentful of the responsibility she had assumed. But this harsh truth couldn't be hidden forever, as an unexpected event was about to reveal the situation and clarify everything. That afternoon, on his way home from work, Mike couldn't stop thinking about his mother. Anxiety flooded him, and his nostalgia grew with every step. "I need to see Mom. I need to hug her," he repeated to himself over and over. The memory of her warm hugs and comforting words accompanied him constantly. "I can't wait any longer. I have to see her right now," he decided. He looked at the clock and saw that his workday was over. "What could be more important right now than giving my dear mother a hug?" he told himself firmly, excited about the surprise visit. Mike quickened his pace towards his car. "I know this will make her very happy. After all, mothers deserve all our love and care." His heart beat strongly, filled with anticipation and excitement for the reunion. During the drive to his mother's house, Mike couldn't shake the image of his mother smiling at him. He started the car, and while driving, his mind wandered between childhood memories and thoughts about how good it would be for his mom. Suddenly, although he was very eager to get there, he decided to make a special stop. He remembered a bakery near his mom's house that they used to visit together when he was a child. Without a second thought, he turned at the next corner and headed for the shop. "A chocolate cake will be perfect. It's her favorite," he thought with a smile. When he arrived, the sweet and familiar aroma of freshly baked cakes enveloped him. He picked out the most beautiful cake he saw and bought it with great satisfaction. He knew this gesture would greatly delight his mom and make the reunion even more special. With the cake secured in the back seat, he resumed his journey with his heart even fuller of excitement and hope. Every red light and obstacle on the road seemed to stretch the distance between them just a little longer, he told himself eagerly, as the fatigue of the day began to fade with the anticipation of the meeting. Finally, he reached the neighborhood where he grew up. He parked the car in front of his mother's house and approached the front gate. "Mom, it's me," he called out, clapping his hands, hoping she would appear with her warm smile. But there was no response. Mike frowned and called again, this time louder. "Mom, it's me, Mike!" Silence was his only response. Anxiety started to build in his chest. Where could she be? He thought, trying to stay calm. He looked around, hoping to see some sign of movement inside the house, but it seemed deserted. He raised his voice once more, with a lump in his throat. "Mom! Emily, can you hear me?" The lack of response began to take on a sinister tone in his mind. What had started as a pleasant surprise soon turned into a disturbing sense of alarm. Fear began to take hold of him. What if something happened to them? He thought desperately, as he felt his heart racing faster. Dark thoughts started to invade his mind, turning his initial excitement into a growing sense of danger. At that moment, he remembered that he had a spare set of keys to the house in his car. Fearing the worst, he grabbed them and unlocked the door. Without a second thought, he ran inside, his mind filled with dark thoughts. Imagining something terrible might have happened. The eerie silence that reigned in the house heightened his anxiety. However, what he saw upon reaching the living room was far worse than anything his mind had imagined. There, in front of him, was his mother kneeling on the floor, scrubbing with a small brush as if she were a maid, and his sister Emily watching with indifferent attention like a spectator. In shock and outrage, Mike dropped the cake to the floor, his voice breaking as he shouted, "Mom, why are you on your knees scrubbing the floor?" His mother looked up, her eyes red and her face marked by years of accumulated weariness. Emily barely blinked at her brother's outburst. Her dismissive attitude ignited a fury in Mike that he could barely contain. The tension in the room was palpable, each passing second adding an unbearable weight to the already charged atmosphere. "How is it possible this is happening?" Mike shouted as he rushed to help his mother to her feet, holding her gently while saying, "Mom, what's going on? You never treated us like servants. You've always been a strong and independent woman. Why are you doing this?" His mother lowered her head in shame and barely murmured through her sobs, "My dear, I have no choice. Emily doesn't want to work, and I'm too old to argue with her." Mike felt a stab in his heart upon hearing his mother's words. He hugged her tightly, trying to comfort her. "Mom, don't worry. I promise I'll take care of everything." Turning to his sister, his voice filled with rage, he demanded, "Emily, why are you doing this? How can you treat Mom this way?" But she remained unperturbed, not even looking up from her freshly manicured nails. She knew what Mike had seen was hard to deny, and chose to stay silent. Desperate, Mike turned to his mother and asked, "Mom, please tell me what's really happening here. Why do you let yourself be treated like this?" His mother, with tears in her eyes, summoned the little courage she had left and began to speak. "Son, Emily forces me to do all the housework. She locks me in my room, and when she brings her boyfriends over, she always tells them I'm the maid." Mike felt his indignation consume him, but he also felt a deep pain seeing his mother so vulnerable. "How long has this been going on, Mom? Why didn't you tell me anything before?" His mother closed her eyes, trying to hold back tears, and whispered, "I didn't want to worry you, son. I didn't want to be a burden to you." He hugged her tightly and said, "Mom, you will never be a burden to me. You're my mother, and I will always be here to protect you." He took a deep breath, trying to calm his anger and inspire confidence in his mother. "Mom, this ends right now. You don't have to worry about anything anymore," he said with determination. "I will make sure that this woman gets what she deserves. From now on, everything will change. I won't allow you to suffer any longer." His mother, still with tears in her eyes, felt immense relief hearing his words. She hugged him tightly, relieved to know she was no longer alone. With eyes blazing with fury, Mike approached Emily and firmly said, "Now I understand why you wanted to live with Mom. It wasn't to take care of her, but to exploit her and have me cover all your expenses and whims. You're despicable. Who in their right mind could do something like this to their own mother?" Emily, wounded by her brother's words, decided it was time to defend herself. It's easy for you, Mike. You work, you're successful, and you can do whatever you want with your life. But I have to live with an old woman. Can you imagine how hard it is for me? All I'm doing is surviving, she said with a mix of coldness and indifference, as if there was no bond with that older woman. Mike stepped closer to Emily with a piercing gaze and said firmly, "You will never do this again. From today, I won't pay for any of your expenses. How can you be so ungrateful? Mom took care of us with devotion when we were sick, gave us her unconditional love, and took us to school every day. You are ungrateful. I never want to see you near Mom again." Emily tried to confront Mike, even raising her hand to him, but he caught it firmly in midair. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked harshly. "I'm going to take you to court. You forget that I'm a lawyer." Far from calming down, Emily erupted in anger and threatened, "Do you think I don't have my contacts? You'll see." Mike remained indifferent to her threats, looking her straight in the eyes and responding calmly, "I'm at peace, because I have God as my witness, and He sees everything. Justice will be done, Emily. You'll see." His words seemed to ignite even more fury in Emily. Trembling with rage, she replied with disdain, "You and your religious sermons don't scare me. This won't end here. Get ready." With an unperturbed demeanor, Mike turned and added as he walked away, "I'm not afraid, because I know the truth always prevails. Mom deserves peace, and she will have it." Emily, panting and filled with hatred, watched as Mike walked away, aware that the confrontation had only just begun, but also that her brother was determined as never before. Mike took his mother by the arm and said with determination, "I'm going to pack some of your clothes. You're coming to live with us right now. Do you agree?" She, with tears in her eyes, nodded without hesitation, her heart filled with relief, feeling the protection and love of her son in these difficult moments. While Mike started to gather his mother's clothes, she stood at the doorway, observing with gratitude and sadness the home she had built with so much effort but that Emily had turned into a prison for her. She didn't know what the future held, but she was certain that with her son she would be in good hands. Mike, with a mix of sadness and firmness in his eyes, turned to Emily one last time. With a voice that chilled his sister's blood, he said with determination, "From today, you are a stranger to me. I will seek justice. What you have done is unforgivable, and I will put you behind bars without showing any mercy." He closed the front door. Despite his harsh words and his decision not to pay any of Emily's expenses, Mike decided to let her stay in the house that belonged to their mother. Deep down, he still acknowledged the family bond that united them, aware that Emily was still his sister and their mother's daughter despite the harm she had caused. As Mike walked away, supporting his mother and helping her walk, a mix of pain and determination reflected on his face, ready to protect his mother and seek justice for all the suffering she had endured. When they arrived at the house, his wife Sarah welcomed them with a warm embrace. "Monica, dear, what a joy to have you here," said the young wife of Mike with a radiant smile. Come in, this is your home." With a genuine expression of happiness, Sarah hurried to take Monica's bag of clothes and accompanied her to the guest room. Through tears, Monica thanked her son for rescuing her. "I couldn't bear that torture for another day," she confessed with a broken voice. "Thank you for taking me out of there." "Everything will be fine, Mom," Mike replied, squeezing her hand gently and kissing her on the cheek. "Now you're safe with us." Monica, still sobbing, continued, "I'm worried about Emily's new boyfriend. She will surely make him suffer, and he seems like a good guy." Mike, with a spark of determination in his eyes, responded, "We'll see if he remains free. I will make sure Emily gets what she deserves. No one else will suffer because of her." Monica looked at him with gratitude and let out a final sigh of relief, feeling that she was finally starting a new chapter of her life surrounded by those who truly loved her. 3 weeks had passed since Monica was rescued from her own home. That morning, when Mike arrived at his office, the first thing he asked his secretary was, "How is the case against my sister going?" She replied, "The summons has been sent, and she will soon be judged. It's a relief. What she made my mother go through cannot go unpunished." "Who will be the judge?" The secretary, without looking up from her documents, responded, "It will be Judge Nora Castillo." Mike smiled upon hearing the judge's name. "She's a very good friend of mine," he said with a tone of relief. "We've solved many cases together, and I know she's fair and honest." It's reassuring to know she will bring justice for my mom." With a sigh of relief, Mike turned and entered his office, feeling that a moment of justice for Monica was approaching. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. Mike made every effort to present his case with unparalleled meticulousness, emphasizing the family bond that united Monica with Emily as an aggravating factor for her ruthless actions. Judge Nora Castillo, known for her impartiality and rigor, patiently listened to the arguments of both sides. After a brief recess to deliberate, Judge Castillo returned to the courtroom, ready to deliver her verdict. With a firm and icy voice, she announced her judgment. Emily was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay a $200,000 fine to Monica as compensation for the immense harm caused. The ensuing silence was broken by a collective sigh of relief as justice finally prevailed in this heartbreaking case. Mike felt a mix of satisfaction and tranquility, knowing he had achieved what he had so desperately sought: justice for his mother. As Emily listened to Judge Castillo's verdict, a mix of emotions flooded her being. Tears began to slide down her cheeks as she felt the weight of the sentence fall upon her. However, she also accepted the ruling with renewed dignity. The weeks she had spent away from her mother had given her time to reflect deeply on her actions and the harm caused. Before leaving the courtroom, Emily requested a moment to speak with Monica. With slow steps and a downcast gaze, she approached her mother, who received her with a serene but sad expression. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Emily began, her voice breaking with emotion. "I don't understand how I could have done so much harm to you, but I am so remorseful. I consider my sentence just, and I hope this time will help me amend my mistake." Monica, with the love and understanding that had always characterized her, took her daughter's face in her hands, kissed her on the forehead, and replied, "Thank you, dear. It means a lot to me that you can see your mistake. This time will help you reflect." Tears ran down both their faces, blending in a moment of deep connection and forgiveness. The courtroom, which had maintained an imposing silence during this brief interaction, bore witness to the power of repentance and reconciliation. The pain both felt was palpable, but so was the hope that this difficult chapter could finally lead them to a path of healing and understanding. After the trial, Monica decided to sell the family home, which now only brought back memories of a past filled with pain and anguish. She believed that parting with those walls impregnated with bitter memories was a necessary step to close that chapter and move towards a new life. The day Monica arrived at her son's house after the trial, she was greeted with a warm welcome. Her daughter-in-law, aware of how difficult the whole process had been for her, had planned a special surprise. As Monica crossed the threshold, she noticed small details that spoke of the care and love with which they had prepared for her. The aroma of her favorite food filled the air, and on the dining table, there was a bouquet of fresh flowers with a card that simply said, "Welcome home, Grandma. We love you." Monica's heart filled with a mix of relief and gratitude as she hugged her family. Monica was deeply surprised to learn she was going to be a grandmother. Mike and Sarah had kept the news until the situation with Emily was resolved, and that was the perfect moment to share this blessing. This news brought Monica such profound joy that it allowed her to leave behind the suffering of recent years. She felt reborn with the promise of a new life on the way, and suddenly, all the hardships and pain dissipated like clouds after a storm. Finally, Monica understood that life is full of ups and downs, and that even in the darkest moments there is always an opportunity to find light. The challenges she had faced had strengthened her and prepared her for this new stage of her life, surrounded by love and with the anticipation of the arrival of a new family member. With gratitude, Monica looked towards the future, ready to embrace each new experience with a heart full of joy and serenity.